If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. A few weeks ago, I had to fly out to a small town I'd never been to before in order to look for a place to live. My boyfriend flew with me, and before the trip, I researched all sorts of apartments on Craigslist and set up a bunch of appointments. Our first appointment was in the afternoon in this sort of remote residential area. Now the landlord had actually filed over some information for us. Now he said to call him an hour before the appointment to confirm I'm coming. I did. He didn't answer. So my boyfriend and I started walking up to the home and just hoped that he would show up. Maybe 10 minutes before the appointment, he called me. "You coming?" he said, sounding like an older man, having this very strange, slow way of talking. But I just thought he was older, and did so because, yeah, we're at the house now, coming up to the front. He gets extremely upset. We? Oh yeah, I have my boyfriend with me. You never told me you had a boyfriend. You never said that. Now it had never crossed my mind to tell him this information, since my boyfriend would not be coming to live with me. He was just helping me while looking for apartments. I told the man so. After a very long pause, he said, "I'm sorry. It's just, sometimes people don't tell me when they're married, and it surprises me. I'll see you very soon." Then he hung up. Now I told my boyfriend about what the man had said. He was immediately weirded out. He wanted to leave, but in honesty, there were very slim pickings in terms of real estate at this point, so I stupidly said that we had to stay in case it's a place. As we're discussing it, we see a man leave the house we're gonna view. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking. Greasy hair, weird eyes. He took one look at us and ran out of the home to his car and pulled away from the curb with a screech. Okay, so now we're weirded out. But this isn't enough for us to bail yet, nah. And we looked at each other wondering what to do, and the landlord arrives. He's in his 50s, very tall, very strong looking. His eyes are completely blank, empty of warmth or emotion. He slowly walks up to us and says, "I'd shake your hands, but mine are dirty." "From what?" we said. "Work." Followed by silence is his reply. He has a lot of questions about me, completely ignoring my boyfriend. The entire time he stares into my eyes without blinking. What am I going to do school for? What other places am I considering? Is my boyfriend moving here too? I tried to keep my answers as vague as possible. Meanwhile, my boyfriend asks the landlord the same kind of questions, which he refuses to answer. Then he says, "Let me show you the basement," out of nowhere. At this point, I should have noped out of there, but I didn't. I kept on thinking and telling myself that this was an eccentric old man from a small town, and that we're just feeling paranoid. My boyfriend, on the other hand, wanted out of there, but he followed us as a man led us back to the house, away from the street, sort of to this detached part which is a shed. He opens the door, and we see that the stairs leading downstairs go to utter darkness. He flipped the switch at the top of the stairs, and the light doesn't come on. Normally the response for this is, "Oh crap, the light's out," or something like that. But he just said, and slowly walked down into the darkness. Then he stood there without moving in the dark and said, "Aren't you coming down?" "There's nothing to see if the light's out," said my boyfriend. The landlord just stands there for a long time, then slowly walks up the stairs, closes the door to the basement without saying a word. He left us then, but came back, taking us back inside. Weird and increasingly creepy things ensured. He now says that the only exit is the front door, locked automatically. When my boyfriend tried to fiddle with it, he gets really upset and told him to leave it alone. The man kept trying to box us into small rooms, kept reaching his hands into his pockets, only to take them away when he caught us looking. On Craigslist and in person, the man claimed that there was a grad student already living there, but the evidence seemed very low. There were neat piles of generic textbooks on the table, but not other things a 20-something-year-old might read. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, but no other food in the fridge or anything. There was maybe 3 t-shirts in the closet. The supposed grad student wasn't out of town, but the landlord couldn't say what school he went or how long he'd be renting the home for. Finally, the man showed us every single room but one. This one he refuses to open, claiming it's just the attic, and we didn't need to see anything up there. He gave us several reasons when we inquired. It was unfinished. There was furniture up there. It will smell bad. The last one I believed, because it smelled terrible. Now finally we made our excuses and bolted out of there. The man walked us out, pretending to get to his car first, because he needed something. When he thought we turned the corner, he slowly made his way back home. Now we're fixated on the idea that something was terribly wrong here. We found out 3 things later: that he was a pillar of the community, known by a lot of townspeople. There was no evidence of him owning or managing a real estate company as he claimed to on Craigslist, and that he had listed his home address as a real house that we had been touring, but that's also where the grad student lived. Apparently it's known he's weird and to be avoided. It's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm so glad I didn't go there alone.
Me and my girlfriend Kylie decided to buy an apartment together. She was looking on Craigslist and saw a really luxury penthouse apartment for only $300 a month. It was really nice and it looked over the city, had really nice bedding and a big bathtub, just everyone's dream apartment. Kylie calls the man and he said he's happy to show her the apartment, and she said, Me and my boyfriend are on our way. What's weird is the man on the phone was like, "Oh, alright. I didn't know you were having people come with you." Kylie says to me that we should just see what it looks like and just leave. I agreed and wait outside the apartment. It was really rusty looking and had tall grass around it. We looked at the ad and both looked at each other as we saw a greasy looking man come up to us, and he had a white tank top on and tan shorts with a rusty beard and braided hair. Kylie and I were kind of looking at each other in disgust. He pointed his finger at me and said, "You stay downstairs, young man." For me, being from Canada and being young, I have never witnessed anything like this in my life. Now I should say, Kylie's from Australia and she's pretty tough, so if this man had tried anything, she would kick his ass. I waited downstairs and I heard a faint scream coming from the basement. I didn't think much of it as I thought it was just a kid outside. Then I heard it again and decided to call the police and told them what was going on. They came after 20 minutes and Kylie pulls me outside and says she's not going to get this place at all. I told her about the screams in the basement. The man was arrested and wanted in another state, and the screaming downstairs came from a woman named Stephanie who was interested in the apartment, which in reality Kylie said it was a really dirty house with women's clothing everywhere. I now know to never search stuff on Craigslist again. Me and Kylie now live in a really nice rent-to-own home in Oregon County, and all I have to say is don't always believe what you see on Craigslist.
Back in my younger days, when I was still living with roommates, I had what turned out to be one of the most dangerous encounters of my life. I was looking to move and was about to leave to see a place in the perfect location. Found it on Craigslist at a good price. There were two seemingly professional male roomies. At the last minute, my boyfriend suggests that he goes along because a place is nearby and they'll have to meet at some point anyway. So we get there and I introduce myself, and the one roommate seems a little taken aback by the fact that I have someone with me. I suppose it could be seen as unusual to bring your boyfriend, but oh well. The damage has already been done, I think to myself. If they don't allow me in their room simply because he's with me, I can't deal with it. Now, let's just see the place. The apartment is huge. We're both subtly impressed, until we turn the corner of the living room and see it. A 2-camera setup with a light pointed at the couch. There's a guy sitting on the couch that is introduced as the other roommate. He jumps off the couch and gives my boyfriend the same weird look. I now realise what they're looking at, and it's disappointment. I shot to my boyfriend a quick look of understanding, and we silently decide to continue with the tour, as to not escalate the situation. I casually joke that it's nice they have a camera, so I can videotape myself for auditions. Then they laugh nervously and say, "Yeah, that's what we were doing." He then brings us over to my room, and is literally showing me a broom closet. You cannot get a single bed in there. I take this opportunity to get out of there by saying, "Oh, that's not too bad. I have a queen bed. I won't be able to fit. Thank you for the time though." When we get out to the street and walk around the corner, we look at each other in stunned silence.
So this happened a few years ago, and I just recently remembered it. For a little background, I am a 20-year-old female from Germany. When I was 17, I was in a long-distance relationship, and was desperate for some extra cash, because I spent most of my pocket money on train tickets to see my boyfriend. so I put up a babysitting ad on the German equivalent of Craigslist. Soon I got a call, not an hour after putting up the ad. I was greeted by the voice of a man. The conversation started off innocently enough, with him telling me that he had an 8-year-old and needed someone to watch him after school, as both him and his wife were working full time. I expected him to ask me about my experience with kids or something to that effect, but instead he went on to tell me that his son could be a little difficult. I told him I didn't mind, and that I'd find a way to deal with it. Would you hit him if he's being naughty? I was taken aback by this question. I'm very against violence against children. Even spanking is child abuse in my eyes. I told the man that, and that I'd do my best to find a non-violent way to deal with his problems. But what if he was hitting you? Would you hit back? I replied to him with a firm no. At this point I started to feel angry, as it dawned on me that this was obviously a common occurrence for this child to be hit. He kept on throwing scenarios at me and asked if I would discipline his son in that situation, and that his old babysitter apparently frequently spanked him. I eventually told him, as politely as I could, that if a parent chooses to use spanking as a form of punishment, that was either their business, but as a babysitter I had no right to hit a child. He was silent for a while, then asked me if I would bathe his son. I honestly don't remember what my exact response was, but it definitely wasn't yes. He went on explaining that his son was supposed to take a bath every Thursday and that he hated taking baths. He wanted to know how I would make him get in the bathtub and if I would strip him naked. At this point red flags came up. I dodged the question as best I could and said something to the effect of, things like this are a parent's job, not a babysitter's, and that the parent should make him take his baths in the evening after work, but he kept pressing, asking things of an obscene nature, if I'd wrestle his son naked, etc. I just kept saying no until he eventually called me back. I removed my phone number from the ad immediately and told people to contact me via email instead. I also got a new phone number for reasons unrelated to this unsettling phone call. So luckily I never heard from him again. I just hope his son, if he actually had one, which I honestly doubt, is just okay.
When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It's a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It's cheap to rent, close to campus, so the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29, called Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair, wearing pale makeup. She seemed really nice, although a little quiet, but she seemed to like me and agreed to move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a little bit off with her. Throughout the dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like him, so it didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she said if I'd seen her room yet. I said no, so she took me there. At first I was kind of hesitant, but agreed. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printouts of him everywhere. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it, nor would I. It was creepy. The whole night, she had been saying how I look like him. It's now obvious to me that she's obsessed with him. A few weeks passed. I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls at night. I wondered what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would come out for like 2 minutes and would be slurring her words, so I suspected that she's drinking a lot. Sometimes, she wouldn't say anything and just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised, saying, "Hello, Beth." Then, there's a long awkward pause, and she'd let out this high-pitched giggle. It was very uncomfortable being around her. She gave me chills. So one night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom and the lights are off, but I could still see Beth standing at the door, face against it. I can now see that she's turning to look back and forth over and over again. Every time she turned the bolt, she muttered my name. Seeing her standing in the dark, mumbling my name really freaks me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looks like the bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly go back to my room and try to sleep. So one night, I'm watching Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room and turned the living room lights on, forcing me to pause the movie, which is really annoying. She then said to me if I want to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy setting, to say the least. Now, 10 minutes into her story, she was so riled up. She began screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbours were going to call the police, and she wasn't listening to me when I said to her to lower the volume. Amidst all of the screaming, one thing that really freaked me out, she's in such a fit that she says, "I'll slit his throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl is capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen became more and more worrying to me, disturbing to say the least. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening and started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty quick, went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the home with her. What's worse is that there's no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front to barricade. Now there's this one time that I wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turn on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see through the opening of the door. She was so drunk, having this intense, crazy look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed, yelling at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I could not fall asleep. The next morning, when I went out the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over. All I could think about was her saying that she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough now. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned it on, and to my shock, I received at least 40 text messages in the last 2 hours. They're just insane, from "Hi, how are you?" to "I hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard of her again. I always wondered if I hadn't set my dresser in front of the door, would she have quietly come into my room to murder me?
I am a 25-year-old guy. This happened 4 years ago. It's still unresolved, if you'd like to call it that. This Friday night, I had gotten off work around 5:30 PM and was ready to make plans for the night. I was recently single, and with asking readers not to judge, I had made up for lost time. I had met a few new girls, but most other single girls I knew didn't think my breakup was for real because my girlfriend and I had been together for such a long time. As the type to stay away from clubs, I began exploring online dating. While at home, I started looking at girls near me on POF. For some reason, that night, I really wanted to be in the company of a woman, and the hour I'd spent with no suitable response began to wear my patience down. I eventually looked on Craigslist and posted personal ads. Now, I know Craigslist is not the best place to meet people, but at this point I was thinking with the other head, if you know what I mean. I went out for an hour or two, and when I returned, I noticed that I had some responses to my ad. Mostly spam, obvious escorts and a catfish. I may have been desperate, but I wanted someone I felt comfortable with, on a friend and personal level. After weeding out, I saw one response that looked legit. I could tell she'd read the ad, and it was an actual written response. She even included a few pics, which all of them she looked normal. She was cute, but didn't look like a model from a magazine or anything like that. They just looked like selfies she took herself. In hindsight, there was something about this that I didn't catch at first, which is important to the rest of the story. I use a dummy email for Craigslist, and I've set it up so that pictures don't download automatically. I learned my lesson after posting an ad for a table and getting a dick pic. However, these pics showed up right away as soon as I opened the email. This will tie in later. After some back and forth, I decide I'll come over. She gives me the address and I see that it's an apartment building. Even better, as I'm always thinking of safety. I didn't want to go inside an actual home. I get there and email that I'm outside, and just give me the exact building and apartment number. She tells me to walk outside and walk to the courtyard, so she can make sure that I am who I say I am. Understandable. I said I was 5'11". It would be scary on her end if someone 6'5" was out there. After seeing that it was truly me, she says she has to tell me something. I'm thinking the worst here, and I start to think of what it could be. Then she tells me, "I'm really a man, I'm sorry." Now I'm pissed, but that washes over immediately as I feel played. I'm prepared to take my loss and quickly head back to my car when I got more emails. He tells me to come in, and that he can give me money, or cook, or have drinks or whatever. He sounds like he just really wants a company, but I'm sorry, but I'm just not chilling with some guy. He then sends me the last email that simply says, $200, 2 hours, no touching, no sex. It catches my eyes, and I walk up to his door. Stupid I know, but at this point I'm thinking I'll just take his $200, maybe knock over some of his things for tricking me, and just leave. My better judgment gets the best of me thankfully, and I'm about 5 feet from his door, and I turn around and leave. I decided this was a sign that I needed just to stay at home for the night. I stopped at a 7-Eleven to grab a beer. I get back in my car and start reading through Facebook. All of a sudden I get a Facebook message from someone I didn't know, who I can tell is a fake profile, saying, "Sorry, can you please come back?" I get upset of the nerve of this guy, and then the air escapes from my throat. How on earth did he get my personal Facebook? I used a fake email that has no ties whatsoever to my real name. I message him back, "Leave me alone, I apologise but I'm not interested." The man then threatened me by saying something along the lines of, "You should listen," then said my name. Of my job. It was listed on my Facebook, but it was my first ever camp job before college, so it really didn't mean much. I told the man, "Either stop or I'm coming back with some help to make you stop." I didn't get any more messages after that. I deleted the Facebook messages, deleted my email account and went home. 2 days later, I'm on my computer, when again I get a Facebook message from the guy that says, black shirt. I don't even begin to give the time of day to decipher that and delete the message. I block the man. 10 seconds later, I come to the realization that I'm wearing a black v-neck. I look at the window as if I'm suspecting someone to be peering inside, when I remember I'm on the 11th floor of a high-rise building. There's only one way in, and the door has a strong deadbolt lock. Whenever I come in, I quickly close the door and lock the door due to my pets, so I knew there was nobody physically in my place with me. I'm startled, but I brush it off as a scare tactic. I bet like 6 in 10 guys right now are wearing a black t-shirt. The man just seemed like a lonely troll, and I'm sure he was doing this to everyone who felt trapped in his Craigslist scheme. I closed my computer down and went on with my day. 2 days later, I'm sitting back at my computer as usual, when once again the guy messages me. I already know it's going to be some nonsense, so I'm going to do a mark as read / delete thing, so he can't see that I've read it. I see the partial message that says, black and red robe. I literally scoot in my chair back and stare at my computer. Right behind me, I'm sure reflecting in my screen if the light would have hit it correctly, sat aglow with black water and red land. A friend got it from me because it was different. I understood it right away. This man could access my webcam. I then thought back to my original email. He penetrated through my firewall, and he somehow tied my fake email to my real name. I am pretty good with computers, but I'm the first to take note when I'm dealing with someone who is a genius with computers. This man gave off every vibe that he knew what he was doing in the computing world, and maybe even the hacking world. I slam it shut and pace around the room, mumbling to myself that I'd been so careless to get in a position like this. I run to a drawer and scramble for the black electrical tape. I find some and place it over the cam. I am officially freaked out at this point. I'm not a tough guy by any means, and I hold my own in most situations, but I felt out of control. I delete my Facebook and every social media account as well. I spend the next 10 minutes prioritising my online presence and cleaning out my computer. I keep the tape on and try to get on with my week. 2 days later I come home from work around 6 PM. I come in and close the door and greet my pets. I see a white piece of paper that was slid under my door. This usually either meant maintenance had a project going on, or we were late on rent, or the elevators were broken. We got a lot of those elevator letters. I pick it up and place it on the table as I get my dog to stop jumping on me and put my bag down. I pick up the note and it says, blue doormat. To give you some background, during my drunken escapade, my ex and I brought a bright blue doormat that we were both 100% certain was green and would match the green carpet outside our door. We then sobered up the next morning and we realised how off we were and decided to keep it as a joke. This man had been inside my building and at my door. The thing is, it was a big building. You would need to know the building number, address, floor number and apartment number. My dog wasn't going crazy, but I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I swung the main closet doors open. Nothing. I ran into the bedroom and swung the closet doors open. Once again, nothing. I raced in the bathroom and opened the shower curtain. Nothing. The man had not been inside, but he had been close enough. I'm not the type to call the police, but I felt that I didn't know what to do. After sleeping on it, I called 911 the next day, and asked for a non-emergency. After a hold, I'm connected to a lady and tell her what's going on. She says she can't do anything, but gives me the number of the police of the city where the man lived. I call and speak to an officer, and basically tell him that I'm not trying to press charges or anything, but can someone please go over there and scare him or something. I could tell the cops wanted nothing to do with me, but I kept his ear, probably because he could hear a rational young man basically pleading with him to help. He said he would send someone out there. I get a call a few hours later from the station. The cop I spoke to before says that there was no answer at the door. He told me that he went to speak with the leasing officer and the sales manager, and the only person who lived there was an old lady who had been there forever. I froze for a moment. The guy wasn't even at that apartment when I came there. I started to think, was he in a different apartment? Was he waiting in a car, behind a tree or somewhere in the courtyard? I personally think he was somewhere inside a neighbouring apartment, just watching. However, I had never felt so careless. The cop told me to reactivate my account and just wait for another message. I did that for a month or so before shutting it down for good, before making another one. I just felt more comfortable that way. I never had another encounter, and I've since moved and gotten a new computer. I got the courage to go up to that apartment twice. The first time I didn't get a response when I knocked. The second time I was greeted with an older lady, similar to what the cop had told me. I told her what happened and she assured me she had no sons or nephews or anything like that. She left me with a lecture telling me to be safe. That was 4 years ago. I'm 25 now, and to look back at my 21-year-old self, I would never even consider meeting someone online like that now. Please, if it seems sketchy, it is sketchy.
This happened last year, around this season, while I was broke, struggling to make ends meet. I just moved out and didn't want to resort to going back to my mum and dad's house. Anyway, I was so desperately trying to find anything. I went to Craigslist for caregiver, housekeeping type gigs to make some quick cash. While I was searching for a full-time position, I knew I wasn't going to be there too long. How bad could it be, right? After responding to several, I got a bite back from a man who advertised as being disabled, who needed help with his morning routine and whatnot. Now, I knew it could be difficult for some, and I felt a bit bad. After chatting on the phone and coming to the conclusion he was nice and normal, I proceeded to head over to his town's house late one night to help him with his nighttime routine. He lived a bit out of the way from me, but I was so desperate and didn't mind. He even said to me that I could spend the night there if I needed. Once I got there, I found he was a decent looking man in his late 30s or early 40s with a cane. He paid me $200 up front for the expected nighttime and morning routine the next day. He explained to me that he's ex-military, coming back from surgery recently. Things start to get weird when he offered me some wine, commenting on how cute he thinks I am. Now honestly, I should have seen this as a big red flag, but again, I was super poor and didn't want to cheat him, so I gave him the benefit of doubt. He then led me to his bedroom where he got undressed for his evening shower. I was horrified that he was turned on and wanted me to lather him up. He then said, "Do I want to take my clothes off for him?" I said no. Now after giving him a normal shower, he got out and said he's heading to bed but didn't want to wear any clothes. The guest room where I was to stay was right next to his, and though I was tired, I was very on edge. My gut instinct was telling me to get the hell out of there. The issue was that we're on a 3-story townhouse and on the top floor, and that he had installed baby gates on each floor so his cat couldn't run away. Also, he turned off all the lights on the lower floors, so to get out, I'd have to pass his room. I now quietly arrange my stuff in my purse while I hear his TV blaring, and to my horror, I saw him walk swiftly to his bathroom without his cane. I realize now he's not disabled, since before he said he could not walk without it. As quickly and quietly as I could, I fled and ran like hell out to the room while he's in the bathroom. I now jump like I'm an Olympic sprinter, getting out of there as quick as I can over the cat gates to the dark stairs. Now as I throw open the front door, I hear his house alarm going off. I get into my car as quick as lightning, heart beating like crazy. He then calls me immediately. I sped out of there and was terrified. Who knows what could have happened if I stayed overnight? I'm glad I didn't have to find out.
I am a mobile user, so you know the drill. This may get a bit long. This happened 4 years ago when I was in college. It was around 2 AM at a friend's parents' house, who were very laid back, and that's an understatement. Myself, my cousin, and his girlfriend at the time, Holly, were snoozing in the living room. A phone goes off and wakes up Ted, and I see it's Holly's phone. Holly's in a deep, pot-induced coma, so we ignore it and go back to sleep. The phone continues to ring, so Ted finally answers it. They've never been shy of looking into each other's phones, but don't abuse the privilege. He says hello a few times, before Amal asks for Holly. Ted immediately hung up and got suspicious as to why Amal was calling Holly at 2 AM. He goes through her phone while I'm in the bathroom. While washing my hand, Ted knocks on the door saying, "Hey, we need to take her home, now." So I dry my hands, and he wakes her up, and we all get in my car and drive off to her part of town. Holly keeps asking Ted what's wrong and what's going on. Ted finally blew up about the call. Emails he found in her phone proving she had been prostituting herself on Craigslist again, and that he was done. I'm as quiet as a crypt keeper, as she's bawling her eyes out and losing her shit trying to explain. We wait to get to her house before he can even fully stop the car, and he tells her to get the fuck out and to lose his number. She goes inside in a snotty mess and we leave. When we pull up to his house, we sit inside my car for a while, talking about what just happened, and giving him time to vent, and tell me that this isn't the first time they've dealt with this. Out of nowhere, a black town car pulls up right next to us, and Ted says, "Oh crap." 3 people, 2 men and an older woman get out and surround the car. I can see that the youngster of the 2 men has a firearm. The woman goes to Ted's side, yelling for him to get out of the car and take his ass whooping like a man. I start freaking out, asking who these people are, and the woman starts trying to yank my doors open and punch my windows. Ted says it's Holly's mum, her stepdad and her cousin. When his mum punched the window for the 3rd time, I notice his cousin laying his hand near his firearm, so flight 1, and I immediately put the car in reverse and drove backwards down the street to get away. I slid into a person's yard. I've since apologised and compensated for the damage. And as we took off, I saw them run into their car and give chase. I had never been so panicked in my life. We were flying down regular roadways at 50 or 60 miles an hour. I'm running red lights, taking last minute turns. I must have burned all the treads off my tyres, because my car skidded a good handful of times. They chased us for 22 minutes, while the whole time I was praying, where the fuck is the cop when you need one? When we got to a quiet neighbourhood I knew well, we turned down a street heavily covered in trees, and Ted said, "Turn your lights off and stay on the brake." I do as I'm told and rolled down the street slowly. I stared into my rearview mirror, and we saw them drive past the road that we were on, very slowly, but thankfully they didn't see us. When we were sure we lost them, I parked and started yelling at Ted, asking why they were chasing us and what was going on. As I'm having my panic attack, his phone rings and it's the mum. He answers and they say they want to meet to talk and get Holly's phone back. In the heat of everything, idiot Ted forgot to give Holly her phone back. I said I'm not meeting them without a cop present, so we tell them to meet at a local gas station that we know cops monitor frequently. When we finally get there, thankfully there was an officer on duty. They arrived 2 minutes after we did, and Ted got out to deal with them, in plain view of the cop, and the camera outside the gas station. I noticed the cousin was not in the car when they pulled up. I couldn't make out everything that was said, but Ted handed her the phone. They talked for about 15 minutes, with her flailing her hands, getting in his face and even pointed at the cop in what looked like she was going to say something to them. When it was over, he got back and we drove off. So when we dropped Holly off, she walked in her house crying. Her family immediately asked what was wrong, and Holly wouldn't say anything, just cried. So in their minds they jumped to conclusions that Ted hit her. She didn't even try and correct them. When he tried to show her mum her ways, she completely swept it under the rug, and tried to make him the reason for it all. I told him he was better off without that crazy, and he dodged a bullet. The next week was spring break, so we took a much needed trip to Colorado. Before I begin the story, I'd just like to say that I live in a big college town, so posting or responding to Craigslist ads looking for roommates is completely normal. This takes place last Thursday night. My best friend Katie was looking for a roommate as she lived with her mum and wanted to move out as soon as possible. She posted an ad on Craigslist looking for a 1-bedroom or a room for rent with roommates. A guy about our age, 22, texted her telling her that he and his girlfriend were about to have a room for rent in their town home as their other roommate was moving out. Excited and surprised at the affordability, Katie agreed to meet him and check the place out. Since she's not an idiot, she brought our good friend Damon with her. They met this guy and neighbours, and Katie decided that she really liked him and the place, but needed to get another opinion. Later that night, Katie called me and asked me if I wanted to go back over there to meet the guy. She told me how cool he was and how much we all had in common. I agreed. I texted my boyfriend, who was at work at the time, to let him know where I'd be just in case. We arrive at the apartment, and I'm instantly drawn to this guy. He had great energy and was all over sweet. His girlfriend worked over the street and came over for a few minutes on her break. She was all very sweet, and I recognised her as one of my friend's sisters. She went back to work, and we continued talking and laughing with the guy and his neighbours. The guy had made a comment about him and his girlfriend, and how they used to be into orgies and things like that. Katie and I, however, are not into such things. We left around 3 AM, and I could go pick up my boyfriend from work. The next night, Katie asked me if I wanted to go back over there and hang out, have a few drinks, and get to know his girlfriend a little better. Once again I agreed. It was just the 4 of us this time, and we were all taking a few shots, and had a couple of mixed drinks. His girlfriend has anxiety like Katie, and ended up having a horrible drunken panic attack. We left shortly after, as it was a bit much to handle, and didn't think much of it. Now, Katie's favourite movie is Harry Potter. They invited us over on Saturday night to have a Harry Potter marathon, and unfortunately, my boyfriend was at work and he couldn't attend. Everything was completely normal up until he put the second movie in. Katie and I were sitting on the floor, and his girlfriend came down to join us for some girl talk and whatnot. Later, he came down to join us. Everything was normal for all of 10 seconds, when he decided to lie across all 3 of us. He started groping Katie, and she started groping me. Katie and I made it clear that this was not okay. Being pinned under the girlfriend, I was not able to get up as she's much bigger than me. She begins to put her hands down my pants and insert her fingers, as I'm trying to get up and telling her to stop. He gets behind his girlfriend and begins to have intercourse with her. Katie and I are trying to stand up, and he finally says, "Oh, you're not comfortable with this." We tell him that we were never comfortable with this, and we need to leave. He lays down next to us, and we gather our things, and he begins masturbating. All the while, his girlfriend is trying to pull us back down, and tackles Katie and begins groping her. We finally break free and run out the house. The next day we filed a police report for sexual assault, and we're still waiting to hear from the detective. The moral of the story is, don't look for roommates on Craigslist, and don't trust people because they seem nice.
So about a year ago, I was on Craigslist looking for a Bluetooth speaker. I found one that wasn't too far away from me. It was nice and modern and looked really good. I had to meet up at this guy's house to get it. Now, his house is in a really weird location, deep in the woods. As I'm approaching, I get a really weird feeling about what's gonna happen there. I just don't like it. Now as I'm approaching, the house seems abandoned. I can see some of the other windows are boarded up. I have a bad feeling about this, but a good deal is a good deal, right? So I make my way there, and I'm greeted by a giant of a man. He looks so strange, like he hasn't washed for ages. Not the kind of person you'd expect to see selling a Bluetooth speaker. Anyway, I get chatting to him and he seems okay. I eventually get the feeling that something's a little off about him. He can't wait to show me the basement. Now, I say that's fine, I just need to see the speaker. He tells me to wait while he brings it out. So I'm waiting in his living room and he places it on the table. I say I have to go back to my car. He tries to stop me, but I say I'll be 1 second. I was ready to drive out of there, but I thought, well, he's got the speaker and I do need one. So I quickly head back. As I do so, I hear that he's playing these weird screaming sounds. Honestly, it sounded like somebody is being murdered. I said, watching a horror film, were ya? He says, oh no, just playing some music. Then realising what I said, he says, oh yeah, I can't get it to turn off. As I look down, I see the speaker's not even on. With that, I bolted out of there like my life depended on it. I drive out of there quicker than I've ever drove before, terrified on the phone to the police. They say they're going to send a unit down there to investigate. A few weeks later, I hear a follow-up from them that they checked out the place and the old man was long gone, and there was nothing in the basement. I really love Craigslist. I've estimated that I've met maybe 300 people from buying and selling stuff, and for the most part, everyone's nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers online again. Now, I was in my early 20s when this happened, and I'm a female. Now, it's 2009. I'm staying with my parents for Christmas holidays in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room, cleaning out the closet, finding a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 really bad CDs. It's 21st century now, no one uses them. I figure I'd try and sell the CDs on Craigslist. I put up a listing, 100 CDs from the late 90s and early mid-2000s, all for $35. The next day, I get an email from a guy named John around 2 PM. He says that he's in town and that he wants CDs. He says he can pick them up after dinner around 8. I email them back my address and number, telling him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 PM comes and goes. I figure I've been stood up, which often happens on Craigslist. No big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars, and would come home at bar closing time. This night, he gets home at around 3 AM. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up eating junk food, surfing the web, watching horror films. I hear a car pull up, look out the window, and see him sitting in his car eating. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home and eats in his car, so my mum doesn't know he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. "There's someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a strange man's showing up at 3 AM? I'm confused by this and go downstairs. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy, who's maybe mid-30s, gets out of his car. He says he's a Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in. I tell the guy it's really late to be stopping by, especially without letting me know first. However, since I'm awake, I go grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying them. He says he's engaged to a woman he loves very much and he wants to make her happy. He said last week someone broke into her car taking all the CDs and it upset her, and he wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing and was excited because I had a bunch of the CDs she used to have. Weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists and bands because I was lazy. Anyway, he was doing it for a surprise. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby, and their family barbecue ran really late, which is why he never made it to 8 PM. By this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, Next time maybe you should call or text though. I hand the CDs, he gives me the cash and I go back inside. 3 days later, I start getting texts from an unknown number. Hey, I don't know my way round town. Care to give me a tour? I could use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian, do you do a massage? Would you take $50 for an hour? Happy ending. I finally reply, who is this? He said, oh sorry, I brought the CDs from you the other day. I didn't respond, obviously, showing my friends and we laugh it off. Then I get more text. I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood. I got $40, babe. 3 minutes away. Then swearing at me, asking why I'm being ignored. I immediately ran downstairs to tell my mum and dad. It's night time, so we shut off all the lights outside and inside my home. My mum, little brother and I went to my parents' room in the back of the home. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hands. A few minutes later, I heard him run down from the front hallway, flinging the door open and running outside. We can then hear lots of faint shouting, so we all walk out the bedroom. By that time, my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and hair messed up. Apparently, the guy came driving down our street really slowly. My dad recognized his car and went running outside with the shovel, yelling at the guy. He peels off, but never came back or texted me again. Now for the second guy, this happened when I was moving from Florida to DC and was going to load up my car with as many things as I could. However, I lived on the 3rd floor, plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figure I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist. I said I was looking for someone to help me with some heavy items like the TV and desk etc. into my car. Less than an hour's work, and I said I'd take $45. I give my very first responder my number and address and he shows up. He was probably 5'7", 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off the guy was nauseating. I didn't care, as long as he was getting the job done. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I got upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry after me so he could walk up behind me. I had the door propped open so he didn't have to worry about kneeling to unlock the door or anything. When he'd follow me up the stairs, he'd make weird comments. Eventually, everything loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him and he drives off. I go back in my place and finish loading and cleaning. I go out maybe 45 minutes later to put another load in my car, and I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. When he sees me, he looks away. I look over to the window and knock. He rolls it down and I say, do you need any help? I was confused as to why he returned. I mean, I was really confused why he hadn't left the area even. He didn't say anything, just rolled his window back up and drove off. Alright, weird. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer. Then the texts come in. really weird ones about meeting up tonight and doing weird stuff. I get this sinking feeling it's a Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. He starts describing the clothes that I was wearing from the day and how much he wanted them. I was scared now. He started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to do the block number thing through my provider, so I had to turn my phone off. Later I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite and turned my phone back on. I get another text from him which is really weird again. The Craigslist creep then starts flying up my phone again. I ended up being able to block him. Since then, I've never bought stuff on Craigslist again. Not too long ago, I put a post on Craigslist asking to either sell or trade my fish tank for a smaller one. I put my phone number as a contact source, asking for text only. After a couple of hours, I get a text from someone who's willing to trade. We agreed to meet up at a Walmart in a couple of days when we're both free to do our trade. During those days, the guy kept on texting me, involving in small talk. He asked me about my name, where I worked, etc. And me being foolish, I answered his questions. I use Craigslist often. I never really had a bad experience with anyone, so I never really thought anything about this guy. I just saw him as too friendly. I told this guy what car I drove and what college I went to again. Never really responding, stopping at any personal information he wanted. When the day came to meet this guy, he told me he could only meet after 10 PM. I thought that was odd, but agreed to meet him anyway since my 4 fish had been stuck in a 5-gallon jug. So my boyfriend and I drove to Walmart at 10:15 and got there in 20 minutes. The guy texted me and said he was already there in a yellow Camaro. I replied saying we're in a grey, then our car, and he texted me and said, "Who is we?" At that moment, I realized something's really off about this guy. I replied by saying my husband and I. He never responded after. My boyfriend and I went around the parking lot a couple of times looking for a yellow Camaro, but never found it. I tried calling the guy, and he ignores my calls. We decide it's best just to leave it. Now I don't know what would have happened had I went there all by myself, or even with my boyfriend there. A few years ago, my partner and I moved from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest. We didn't know anyone here. We just saved up a decent chunk of money jumping on a plane. I was excited, and we certainly hadn't regretted making the decision. The plan was to stay at some cheap hotels and hostels until we could find work in an apartment. Finding work was actually easy. We had new jobs within a week of getting off the plane. Finding somewhere to live though, that was a nightmare. Everywhere we looked had an incredibly steep requirement for credit scores and minimum household income. We tried more legit sites at first, but after months of hopping around to different hotels, motels, Airbnb places, We become so desperate we went to Craigslist. So, one day I'm desperately scouring Craigslist for rooms when I come across one that seemed a little weird. The poster said that he had a very large home in a very nice neighborhood and that he wanted to rent out a 500 square foot room for $600 a month with utilities. In this city, it's suspiciously cheap. He also wrote it in a rambling sort of way. It was almost half ad and half open letter. Now obviously, if we weren't so desperate, we would have never considered contacting the man. But we thought that we're playing a good risk of running out of money before we could get somewhere. So we give him a call. On the phone, he sounded relatively normal. He actually suggested that we met up in a public place to talk about the first room. We arranged to meet in a restaurant near the hostel we're staying at. He showed up late, looking surprised to actually see us there. He sat down, speaking for a long time. I say he spoke rather than we talked, because he rambled non-stop about himself, how he was persecuted by everyone in the city. He claimed to be an artist and collector, in between him repeating himself many times about how local people do not understand his passion. He also tells us that the place he's gonna rent us has his personal collection. At one point, he stops talking abruptly, running to the restroom. We took this opportunity to discuss the situation. We knew at this point that he was probably a crazy person, but the threat of homelessness was looming, so we agreed that we should at least see it rather than give way to his eccentricness. He came back to the table sweaty and flustered. Before we could say anything, he said, "I want to show you it right now." We were surprised by this, but we had just discussed seeing it, so agreed. I said to him to text me the address and that we would take public transport to meet him there. He insisted that he drove us there since we didn't have a car. Now, we obviously hesitated to get into his truck. It was obvious even to him, I think, but the previously mentioned desperation was still a thing, and we're pretty sure he wasn't going to try and hurt us. We were right, but it was a bad decision. So we crammed in the front seat of his tiny, rusty, ancient-looking pickup truck. My partner pressed up against the door, and I was uncomfortably close to the driver as he continued his babble about this city and how it's gone downhill, how that everyone he used to know would hang out. Now at one point, I whispered to my partner to get ready for a possible truck and roll situation. He saw me whispering but couldn't hear me over the roaring wind, and he said something about we were romantic together, reminding him of his youth. We eventually arrive at his home minutes after. He had been technically honest up to this point. His neighborhood was decent looking. His home was large, ranch style. I note out loud that he had bars on all the windows and several locks on his front door. He said his collection is very valuable to him, and he just wanted to protect it from the thieves. Once he let us in, I made a point of urging him ahead so that he couldn't get a chance to get behind us. We very quickly noticed three things: his art and collection, and the smell. The man's method of art, of which he was very proud. apparently takes lots of child type things, like baby dolls, stuffed animals and whatnot, and attaching weird things to them. There was so much weird stuff everywhere. There was a baby doll which was hanging off a rope, like it had been hung there. Now his weird stuff was everywhere. He was definitely not concerned about cleanness. The place reeked of mildew. The carpet looked as though it hadn't been vacuumed ever. He then said he loves cast iron pans because you don't have to wash them. There's cluttered pans everywhere with dodgy food on it. We stay behind him mostly silent as he stops every now and then to point out his favourite art pieces, to repeatedly tell us he was leading us to the room that was full of his favourite stuff, but he'd have to get people to move it out for us. He opens the door and said voila. I don't doubt the room. As we walk around, every part of it has more of his weird collection everywhere, hanging from the ceiling. Up to this point, we have done our best to try and not overreact to the situation, afraid he's gonna snap if we do. I start to notice after a while he was getting disappointed we're not reacting. My guess is that he really expects people to be shocked by this. We told him that the room looks big enough and that we'd like to go back to hotel and think it over. No, he doesn't have much of a reaction to us saying this. When he thinks I'm not looking, he reaches for something out of his pocket, tossing it through the doorway into the dark. I'm afraid it's his car keys, so I use the light on my phone to peek in as we press that room. So we piled into the back of his truck, have a long awkward drive back to the place we had been staying at. He was rambling so much and flustered now. He eventually passes the place that we're meant to stop at. As soon as we get to a red light, we jump out and say thanks, this is fine, great to meet you. Now over the next couple of days, he's constantly texting me saying, are you gonna come back? Did you like it? I said that we've declined, but thank you, it's a nice offer. He then said, are you creeped out? Copy and pasted it 30 times. Now I'm not sure why I was being so polite at the time, but I simply block him and get on with my day. So, over the last 7 months, I've been working for someone I responded to on Craigslist. I'll just explain everything. I was searching the internet for some sort of paying gig. I didn't really care what. Then, I came across a post on Craigslist. I had refreshed the page and there it was. Someone was looking for a person to come by and feed their pets. I assumed they were out of town or something, so I contacted them and left my number through email. I got a response immediately, in the form of a cell phone call. The caller was a man who explained to me that he was moving out of town and his parents had cats they wanted fed daily. I gave the man my name so he could run me through everything. In about 20 minutes, I'm hired. I went there the next morning to get all the instructions and whatnot, meeting the man that I'd spoken to on the phone. His name's Ben. Ben explained to me that he would no longer be able to care for his parents' cats, and that his parents needed to focus on themselves. So I was being brought on to take care of that. The money would be left on the kitchen table at the end of every week, $200, just to feed some cats. I know, right? In addition, money for more cat food would be left for me as needed. Then, he told me the first thing that I thought was strange. I was to come at exactly 10 every day and be gone by 10:10 a.m. And I was never, ever, under any circumstances, to interact or speak to his parents when I'm in their home. They will be in their chairs in the living room, watching television, and to never disturb them. He said if any of that would be a problem, to which I assured him it's not. He then showed me the area in which the cats eat and where the food is kept. While not rude in the least, he was very adamant that I do not explore further in the home, which I promised him wouldn't be a problem. He ushers me outside, showed me where the spare keys are, in case the door's ever locked. But he told me that was very unlikely to happen, with that expressing his hope that I could be trusted one last time. I then shake hands with him. He now told me to be there at 10 a.m. every day starting tomorrow. If I'm ever unable to make it, call. Leave a message on their home phone, to which he gave me the number. I shook my head. On my way. The next day comes. I went inside at exactly 10 a.m. I walked into the home, and immediately to my right were Ben's parents, sitting in recliners, facing away from me, watching some kind of game show. I announced my presence, to which they ignore, and made my way to the kitchen. I feed the cats and left. The exact same scenario plays out countless times over the next few months. 10 a.m. Hello, which is unreturned. Feed the cats and leave on Friday. Then I pick up the small stack of 20s from the table. Easy as hell. Then, the inevitable came. One day, I was running late. I got home at 10:08, entering in and apologizing to Ben's parents for being late, to which I do not get a response. They just kept sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I went to the kitchen to feed the cats, look at my phone. 10:11. I walked towards the hall, towards the front of the door. When I reached the living room, I then jumped back in shock. Ben's parents are standing there, completely still, staring directly at me. I apologize for running late and get out of there. Though unnerved, I go back the next day on time. Everything's fine. A few more months went by of nothing strange, and then comes the last day I'm there. I get there at 10:03, but wasn't worried because I knew I could be out before 10:10. The problem came when I was in the kitchen and heard someone whisper, "Help me." It startled me. I jumped, looking around for the source of the cry for help. I saw no one, but I heard it again, and then a third time. I began looking around before realizing I was running behind. I look at my phone, it's 10:10. Now my heart sinks as I look down the hallway, seeing Ben's parents for the first time in light. They are grossly pale looking, very malnourished, essentially walking skeletons. I apologized for taking so long and said I'll be on my way, but they just stood there, blocking the way to the front door. I said I'd take the back door, which was located in the kitchen, but when I went to open it, I found it required a key to open from the inside. Now panic sets in. I look behind me, and I can see that his parents are about half a foot away from the entrance of the kitchen. I have nowhere else to go, except for what I assume was a door to a pantry. They had blank stares across their faces. Their eyes looked as though the life had been drained out of them long ago. In a last-ditch effort, I went through the door that I thought was a pantry, and was instead met with a staircase leading to a basement, with of course no light. As soon as I opened the door, there was a horrid stench that washed out the otherwise clean air. I carefully went down the stairs, looking for a window. They're all now shut. I happened to look upstairs. My parents were now standing next to each other at the top. It was truly horrifying. I get my phone up, dial 911, not knowing what else to do. When I explained my situation, they said they'd send out a car immediately and to stay on the phone with them while they connect me to the unit en route. I run into the dark basement using my phone as light. It didn't provide much illumination since I'm in the middle of a call, but it's enough. There were racks of junk that lined the basement, separating into aisles. I went down to check if any of the windows were possibly loose. Then I turned around, shining the light in front of me. I'm now inches away from them. They had this horrible look on their faces. I screamed, running, tripping over something, sending my phone flying. Of course it's face down. I can't find it. I run back up the stairs into the kitchen, looking back and seeing nothing but darkness because I'm in too deep. Seeing their faces now. I ran down the hall to the front door, flinging it open. I screamed when I saw the cop standing right in front of me. He said if I was the one that called, as I pushed past him to get outside, and told him I was. I look in the window and see the parents sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I explained this time that the crazy old people trapped me in their house and were chasing me. The cop went into the parents and looked around while I sit in the cop car. He came in about 5 minutes later asking, "Are you sure that someone was chasing you?" I said yes, absolutely, that it's the 2 old people that lived there. He informed me that the people that lived there, in the chairs, have been dead for quite some time. I said, "What's the smell then?" He said another body down there in the basement. Backup shows up. I give my statement and explained how I'd been coming there every day for months and months to feed the cats. I told them everything. A few days later, I found out that it was Ben's body in the basement.
A few months ago, some scumbags broke into my apartment while I was at work. They rummaged through all my stuff, tearing apart my room. They took a bunch of stuff, including a bunch of cash I stored away, my Xbox One, a 40-inch flat screen, and a bunch of food from my pantry. I came home that night to find the apartment had been trashed. It looked like a cyclone had moved through my bedroom. Of course I ended up calling the police, who came right over and investigated the apartment. The person had smashed the window in my bedroom and crawled in. I live on the ground floor, so it would have been really easy for them. I gave the police a list of all the stuff that went missing, along with the serial numbers for the electronics. They unfortunately didn't find any sort of fingerprint or anything they could use, and there were no cameras on that side of the building. I called the rental agency for my building about the window, but they told me they couldn't send somebody until the next morning. This was probably the worst weekend of my life. The very thought that someone came into my space and decided they wanted my stuff sickens me. Thieves are the worst kind of people. A couple of months went by, and there was no word on any of the stuff that got stolen. I expected that much. Police in my city are useless most of the time. I had already gotten a new TV, and so all I needed was a new Xbox. I did some thinking, and decided that I wanted to buy a second-hand one, as I didn't want to spend another $400 on a new console. So I jumped on Craigslist and did some searching. Sure enough, I find a seller who wants to sell his for $250, along with all his games and controllers. It was a pretty fantastic deal. The only issue was a guy lived in the next town over. On the other hand, I was getting real tired of not playing video games, and so I gave in. I contacted the guy and inquired about the console. He told me his name was Sam. He seemed like a really cool guy, and he was even willing to hold it for me if I came the same day. I agreed. I jumped into my car 15 minutes later, and drove the 45 minutes to the next town. The town was very rural, and there were a lot of wooded areas. The house I was trying to find was way out there, next to some old train tracks. I pulled up to the house, which was off a dirt road. It was a real piece of junk, run down and overgrown. The old white paint was almost all chipped away, and the guy had a massive pile of trash right in his front yard that was filled with a bunch of old junk, like TV sets and radios. I was unsure if I even had the right house, so I walked up to the door and hesitantly knocked. There was a short wait before I heard someone shuffling on the other side of the door. It opened and revealed a very thin-looking man with a buzz cut. I took notice that his clothes were filthy. He was wearing a tattered flannel shirt and ripped blue jeans. "You Sam?" I asked him. "Yeah, you here for the Xbox?" I nodded nervously with an mm-hmm. He flashed me a smile and invited me inside. I had a bad feeling, like something wasn't right with this guy. His house was a disaster. Almost every piece of furniture was filled with junk and garbage, and it looked like his kitchen hadn't been cleaned in months. I knew right off the bat he was a hoarder. I was worried about being the awkward one, but this guy was about as awkward as one could get. When I think about it now, I feel like he was probably on the spectrum, but I couldn't be too sure. There was also a smell, like something in his house was rotting away, like something dead. He led into the hallway on the first floor, and stopped at the door that looked much newer than the others in the house. "It's right down there," he said. He pushed the door open to reveal stairs leading to a dimly lit basement. Alarms started going off in my head, and I knew that there was something seriously wrong. I stood at the top of the stairs, peering down. Sam stood behind me, almost as if he wanted to make sure I couldn't escape. "Go on then," I said, stepping out his way. "You first." "You first," he replied. His awkward smile had gone to a cold gaze. When I looked towards the basement, the rotten smell had grown even stronger. When I listened closer, I could hear what sounded like millions of flies buzzing around down there. I turned and quickly pushed past him, sprinting down the hallway. He started to pursue, but then he stopped. I ran out the front door and back onto the dirt road, jumping into my car before speeding down the road as fast as I could go. Before driving off, I caught a glimpse of his smiling face in the front window of the house. I made it home safe, which is where I realised he'd sent me a text message. He, with a little winky face. The Craigslist ad disappeared after that, and I've since blocked his number. I thought about calling his town's local police, but after I calmed down, I realised there was probably not much they could do about it anyway. Days later, I started getting weird phone calls, usually hang-ups every time. This persisted for several weeks before I saw Sam's mugshot on the local news. I guess he lured another lucky buyer to his house, and when the buyer refused to go down to the basement, Sam assaulted them with a knife. Luckily, the buyer managed to fight him off and escape. The police were called and were shocked with what they found upon searching his house. The sick, twisted guy had been killing local dogs and piling them in his basement, where he could do weird experiments on the bodies. The thought of it made me sick to my stomach, knowing what potentially could have happened to me if I hadn't ran. I don't know what happened to Sam, but I'm sure as hell hope he's spending his days in a padded cell somewhere.
If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone, it's never take the cheap way out, no matter how good it seems. Something about that decision will bite you one day. You might be lucky. It may only be a mosquito bite. If not, it can be like a shark bite. For me, I wasn't so lucky, obviously, or I wouldn't be writing this story. Now, a couple of months ago, I got in a very bad accident. My car got totaled almost beyond recognition. My insurance company gave a decent amount for it, but the money was tight for me, and I needed a car fast. I went to every place I could, but ended up on Craigslist. For a day, I kept looking for a deal I couldn't say no to. I needed a decent running car for cheap, but it also had to be reliable. All the sellers at the time were asking fair prices. Too fair for me. I was about to give up for the night when I come across the deal I was looking for. So I found this guy, Robert, was selling a 2001 Toyota Camry with 100,000 miles on it, while claiming it runs smoothly for a good price. I contacted Robert. He told me I could test drive it the next day. I took a taxi out there, gave the car a good drive. Now let me tell you, it ran like it was brand new. No complaints at all. It seemed almost too good to be true. So when I got back, I said, was the car new? And how much was it? No matter how much I pressed, he said there's nothing wrong with it. He seemed genuine about it the whole time. I had the car for about a month without incident. Then one night, I was driving home from a long day's work. It's about 1 in the morning, so you can imagine, the roads are desolate. I'm smoking a cigarette with my windows down, listening to the wind fly into the car. I remembered being exhausted. I stopped at a red light and a chill ran down my spine. The light slowly turned green. The sound of the engine mixed with the sound of wind made it almost inaudible. No cars were around, so I slammed on my brakes, bringing my car to a complete stop. I wait a couple of seconds for maybe another whisper or anything, but nothing. No incident occurred the rest of the ride. The next 2 weeks go by without incident. I even forgot about it. Then, something else happened. It's pouring raining while I'm at work, and it's a very slow day, so my boss lets me smoke a cigarette in my car. When I get in my car, I got the same chill once again. Instantly, I remembered my last experience. I sat there in complete silence, waiting for something to happen. About 30 seconds later, my car got filled with the smell of freshly shot fireworks. It got so bad I began coughing, getting out of my car, then running back inside. Now the look on my face at the time must have been far from that of a normal one, because my boss came up to make sure everything was okay. I told him about the smell, and the only thing he could think was some of the kids might have messed with my car. We went to check it out this time and the smell was gone. He said he would check the security cameras later, but never saw a thing. I tried blowing it off again, but this time I couldn't find a reasonable explanation. After an hour straight of thinking about what happened, I tried to give Robert a call. Unfortunately, he cancelled his phone. A week later, I'd just got into an apartment to deliver a pizza. It's going pretty regular. The guy was cool, giving a nice tip. I had a good conversation with him. I'm about to wrap things up and head out when I notice something in the parking lot that catches my attention. Hey, you drove the Camry here, right? Yeah, why? I think there's something in your car. I now look at my car, and sure enough, I see a girl sitting in there with a shotgun. She had black hair and was very pale. God, she's broke in, call the cops. For a few seconds I thought, knew I weren't crazy. And I finally got a person to see it. Turns out it wasn't the case. When I was on the 3rd floor, the girl was looking forward while I was facing her side. I lost sight of her going down the 2nd floor, but I saw her again for a second, and let me tell you, I nearly fainted. She was staring directly at me from ear to ear, but that wasn't the worst part. Her eyes. There's something else. They were normal looking blue eyes, almost pretty, but with a very black iris and around it. There's something else wrong too that I cannot put my finger on. The next thing I know, I feel a tap on my shoulder, breaking my trance. It's a pizza delivery guy informing me the cops have been called. He said, "Why am I standing there?" So I explained. We both looked at the car again and she's gone. The police ended up coming. We filed the report. They do a quick search through my car to see if there's any signs of a break-in. Unfortunately, there's none. Everything was where it should have been. It made no sense. The police said they'd check on cameras and inform me if they saw anything, but they still have not spoke to me. Over the next few weeks, I would hear the damn whispering again, but only when my car or something in my environment made a noise. At first, it's occasional, but by the 2nd week, it's there almost every time. I can make out separate voices, a man and a woman. I still don't know what they're saying. That was until I made it home. A few minutes from my home, I got the chill again. It's coming. I knew it. Ever so clear now. Then I hear it. It's your turn now. I felt ice cold breath run down my neck. In my peripheral, I could see her reflection in my rearview mirror, wanting me to turn, waiting. She kept whispering those damn words in my ear, creating a layer of ice upon my neck. The longer she whispered, the more it felt like I was being pulled into her influence. Finally, I get home, ran inside, locked myself in my room, but I'm starting to think it's a mistake. If I were to look out my window, I could see my car, and the whispering, I'm hearing it again. It's 3 voices now. They keep telling me to look at the car just one more time. Really quick, just for a second. Maybe, no, yes. Maybe I should just look real quick. Not for a second. I mean, what harm could it do? Besides, I've seen one. What about the others?
About 3 years ago, I was obsessed with Craigslist. I would go on there to find anything I needed. It seems more like an addiction now. I had just turned 17, and I was the only person in my homeroom class with a license, but no car. Of course, I went to Craigslist to find a car for a reasonable price. I was scrolling through different varieties of cars when I stumbled upon one in my price range. It was a 2008 Ford Explorer, only $3,000, and at the time, I wasn't entirely sure why it was so cheap, but I was naive. I clicked on the picture and read the description. It seemed harmless enough. I wanted to get rid of this car because it's my wife's. She recently died. I only need $3,000 more to give her a funeral she deserved. If you feel uncomfortable, I can bring my daughter with me. Quickly, I looked at his contract information and messaged him. It didn't take long before I had a reply, and a day that we'd meet. I didn't ask for his daughter to come, since it didn't seem like a murderer. We agreed to meet the next day, and he only lived an hour away. The next day rolled quicker than I expected, and I had to hurry up and leave. I took my dad's car and started to drive to his house, where we'd agreed to meet. When I got there, a chubby man in his early 30s greeted me. Our exchanges weren't anything to put me on edge, but he had an unnerving smile. After our exchanges, I called my dad to come and get his car. I got in my new car and drove home. By the time I got back home, I was exhausted. I took a quick shower and fell onto my bed, and dozed off soon after. At about 2 AM, I woke up to the sound of a car door slamming shut. I rubbed the sleep out my eyes and jerked up. I looked out my window and saw a car in my driveway that wasn't mine, or any of my family members. I saw a short, chubby figure getting out of the car, with what looked like an axe. I was almost frozen, but I had the courage to get my phone out and dial 911. I had an 8-year-old sister, so I carried her sleeping body into my room and locked the door. The police wasn't far from my house, so I guess the man heard the sirens. He ran off because the cops never found anyone. I thought that was the end of it, but I was so wrong. Yesterday evening, I was watching the news, and I saw the police had gotten a deadly serial killer in custody. He was responsible for killing 27 people from Craigslist. It was the same man I'd met. I have escaped death. They said his partner in crime, his daughter, had gotten away, and was looking for people to kill on Craigslist that her father hadn't killed.
I needed a new roommate quickly, and eventually settled on this girl from Florida who was moving out to San Diego. She initially came off as a little goofy and naive over the phone, but in person was just strange. She had no sense for personal boundaries, would eat my food, use my laptop when I wasn't home, and would barge into my room when I had friends over and say the weirdest stuff, all in the first week. She did, and said a ton of things that was so weird when she lived with me. She started hanging out with a co-worker from Subway, along with her co-worker's boyfriend who just got out of jail, and 4 of his friends. They really only came around because she'd buy stuff, and they laughed at the dumb stuff she'd say and do. She would always leave the window cracked because she lost her keys all the time. Anyway, her friends actually broke into my home, stole my TV, laptop, other TV in my small room, this wedding dress my aunt wanted for me off eBay, a bunch of DVDs, my glasses. Now I called her freaking out, and she's just getting home and called the police on me because I broke her laptop. Crazy. The cops came and pulled me aside, and she seemed unstable and suggested I don't use Craigslist for roommates anymore. I had her backed against the wall and was screaming at her when the cops walked in. I thought screw it when they saw that, but after talking to her for 5 minutes, I understood my frustration. The cops looked down to see what was stolen. Now I eventually got my stuff back, and I had to actually set up cameras this time, which cost so much money. Taking the chance on Craigslist is one of my biggest regrets I have. Once I was selling a couch on Craigslist. I really dropped the price low, but I just couldn't seem to get any attention for it whatsoever. In the end, I dropped it to a ridiculously low price, and finally, I had someone show some interest. Now over the phone, this person seemed weird. Like they would stop mid-sentence, laugh a little, then continue. I thought, yeah, whatever, it's just somebody on drugs or something. And I was praying in the back of my mind that they would be sober when they come round. So we agreed upon a date. And I was surprised when they actually showed up. No, I didn't see any car or anything. It really caught me off guard because I was sitting in the living room when they appeared. As I opened the door, I'm met by a tall, weird-looking person who can't really hold eye contact. I said, "Hey, you here for the couch?" And they smiled and said yes. I recognized that weird laugh immediately. I showed them to the couch and said, "Here it is, you got the money." They went, sat on the couch, let out the most maniacal laugh that I've ever heard in my life, got up, and sprinted back into the forest. That was the last I ever heard of them, and the last time I ever went on Craigslist. The weirdest thing that ever happened to me was when I was browsing Craigslist randomly one day. I was searching for a car, and as I clicked on one, I thought my computer was bugging out. It said an old truck as a description. The location was within 1 kilometer of me. And you know sometimes when you're on another page and you open a new one and the picture from that page transfers over? Well, I was thinking that's what happened because it's a picture of me. No one wants to buy me, I thought. As I click further, there's a page listing me for sale, full of details about me, pinpointing my exact address, what food I like and everything. I was freaking the hell out and called the cops. The thing was, a month later it happened again. After this I ended up moving away. I just couldn't stomach the fact that something this weird happened to me twice. None of my friends would ever do anything like that to me. I just pray it as someone I knew messing around, nothing more serious. I bought a truck off Craigslist once. Well, I say bought, almost. Everything seemed fine until we did the test drive. Now I'm not kidding you. As we're going along, the brakes failed and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The handbrake wouldn't work either. We ended up having to both jump out of the doors. The truck ended up rolling all the way down the hill and square into a tree.
I was desperate. I had recently been let go from my job as a CNA at the same place after 11 years. Not even a thank you. I was a young woman trying to make ends meet, and I thought I'd struck gold when I first read the posting on Craigslist. Caregiver needed for elderly couple, mostly for wife. Duties will include assisting with bathing and dressing. May also include some cooking and cleaning. Experience is preferred, along with a kind heart and worker-bee-like attitude. Good starting pay offered. Other than the obvious spelling mistakes, the ad sounded perfect. I did wonder why they didn't ask for any references, but at that point, I couldn't afford to be picky. My other efforts at finding work hadn't panned out at all. Within less than 24 hours after I applied, I received a response back asking me to come out and meet them the next day. I checked my calendar and I was free. The town was basically one made road running straight through the centre of town. There were a few homes on each side. A lot of them were multi-level homes, with some having yards that looked neglected and needed a sprucing up. I pulled up to the house with my GPS blaring, "You have arrived at your destination." I got out of my car and took a moment to look around a bit more. As I was scanning, my eyes met those of an elderly man sitting in a chair on his front porch. I smiled and waved, but instead of returning the gesture, he stared back at me with a blank expression. He had that 1,000-yard stare going, and it made me shiver a bit, despite it being quite warm outside. I didn't see anyone else out, and heard no sounds except an occasional bird chirping somewhere unseen. There was an eerie calmness about the whole area. Answering the front door after several knocks was an elderly man. He introduced himself as Douglas. He welcomed me inside and asked me to take a seat in his living room. I sat down in an open chair, with Douglas saying he'd be right back as he walked upstairs. I heard Douglas lose his footing a couple of times, and I'd hear a thud on the wooden stairs every few steps. I got up and walked over to the bottom of the stairs. "Hey, are you okay, sir?" By the time I got over, I saw him disappear around the corner upstairs. He never did answer me. I retook my seat in the living room and looked around the place. The TV had some old game show on that I didn't recognise. I have to be honest, the whole place looked a bit unkempt and dusty. And then there was a smell. It was something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Kind of musty, like they hadn't opened the house up in a while. I sat and waited for a while. The whole time I thought I heard talking from upstairs, even with the TV on. I'm guessing Douglas was talking to his wife. I wanted to get this guy in though. Lord knows I needed this job. Finally, after a while, Douglas came back down. This time accompanied by his wife. "Hello, my dear. My name's Martha. How did you do?" Her start threw me off a little bit. I extended my hand to shake hers, but all she did was give me that familiar stare like the man outside earlier did. She turned to her husband and he simply nodded at her. She awkwardly extended her hand and we shook. I swear I could feel something tingling beneath the skin on her palm. Another shiver came over me. The three of us sat and talked for a bit, and I got mostly yes and no answers to my questions. Before I could ask about their lack of wanting any references, I had nature calling me to find the bathroom. Martha directed me to one through the kitchen and down another hallway. Her instructions weren't too helpful, but I eventually found it. The musty smell assaulted my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. "Good God," I said. I tried to cover my nose and my mouth as best I could. I thought about cracking the window, but decided to get done and out of there. When I opened the toilet, I was nearly hurled as another wave of stench hit me. What's worse was what was inside. Bugs everywhere. Some looked dead, but most were squirming around in the water of the bowl. Many climbed over each other to get out, as they fell out and came right at my feet. I stepped on a few, and they crushed like dry leaves under my shoes. "Jesus," I said. I pulled the door open so hard it slammed into the wall as I let go. I ran into the hallway, ready to 1 apologise for slamming their door, and 2 let them know about their obvious bug problem. But I only made it the first few feet when I stopped dead in my tracks. At the end of the long hallway was Martha. She was standing there, completely still. The lighting in the hallway wasn't too good, so I could barely see her face, much less anything else. "You okay, my dear? We heard you scream. Everything alright?" "Oh yeah, you guys have a lot of bugs in here, maybe cockroaches, I couldn't tell. And I'm really sorry about the door." "Don't worry about the door, my dear. Happens all the time. Come in the kitchen, we'll have some tea." I really didn't like tea, but I figured I need to try and make up some ground with them after what just happened. Martha went into the kitchen and I soon followed. She reached into the cabinets and was pulling out seemingly everything inside. "Can I help you with something?" It was then I stopped talking and took a closer look at my surroundings. On top of the cabinets, on top of the refrigerator, even on Martha's clothes, were more bugs. Possibly hundreds of them, all their little antennas slowly waving around, and many of them seemed to be looking right at me with large dark compound eyes. Martha. I started stepping out of the kitchen, back towards the living room, back towards the front door. Yes, dear. She was still fumbling around when she finally pulled out the little tea kettle. Found it. I took a quick peek behind me, and Douglas was nowhere to be seen. I turned around to see Martha standing close to me as our noses almost touched. Ah! I fell and landed hard on my back. Martha stood over me as she had handfuls of the creatures crawling all over her clothes and skin. Some fell off onto me, and I tried to fling them off. Where are you going, my dear? Do you not want some tea? As she spoke, a couple of the things fell out her mouth, and I even saw a tooth come out as well. I sprang to my feet and turned towards the door, and smacked right into the thick frame of Douglas. I fell back again, but not all the way this time. I grabbed a chair for support and half kneeled as two bodies of Douglas and Martha slowly advanced on me. It was at this point that something came over me, and I made a split-second decision, one that I would soon come to regret. I got to my feet and sprinted right past both of them. I went between them as they tried to grab me, and ended up falling into each other. I made it to the front door and reached for the handle. It took me a couple of seconds to realise there was no handle. I tried to find another way to get the door open, but nothing would work. I frantically looked around for some other way out. There was no way I was getting into the kitchen or hallway again. I had only one choice, the upstairs. I took the steps two at a time, almost slipping in the process twice. The upstairs was no better than downstairs. It was dark and musty. The smell, God, the smell was putrid. I covered my mouth and nose with one hand, while I tried to open every door I came to. None of them opened, but I swear each time I tried the handle, one, I could hear muffled voices behind the doors. They sounded like they was crying out for help. Finally, the last door I came to swung open without effort. The door was small and set up with only a single bed and mattress along it with a nightstand. The bed was currently unoccupied, and the windows. Both windows had bars crudely placed over them. I caught my breath when I was shoved hard from behind. "This one's for you." I turned my head to see Douglas standing over me. I swear he had the look of satisfaction on his face. Martha followed behind him. They always run. So predictable. She looked down at me and then Douglas, before turning back to head down the hallway. "I'll get you that tea, since you'll be staying up with us now." She laughed in a strange way that sounded forced, like it was foreign to her. I turned back to Douglas, who had now couched down beside me. "Well, let's get comfortable in bed. Our brothers and sisters are waiting." He pointed with both index fingers to the empty room. That's when I heard the sounds of a million nails scratching on the inside of the walls, scratching to get out and get me. He dragged me over to the bed, even as I tried to resist. I had lost the will to fight as soon as I'd entered this room. This had been their plan the whole time, and I walked right into it. God only knows how many others they trapped in there. Douglas threw me onto the bed hard, and we struggled against one another. He held my arms tight and sat on my pelvis to hold me down. "Now, darling, it will only hurt for a moment." He leant right over me and opened his mouth wide, and then I heard his jaw pop out of place. I could hear a loud hissing noise from down his throat. Then I saw them making their way up and out his mouth. Two thick, hairy long antennae. They moved about as widely as the head of some godforsaken monster as it pushed its way up through his throat. As this was happening, I could feel his hold on me lessening up a bit. I searched all around me for anything. To my left, sitting on the nightstand, was a lamp. It wasn't plugged in, so with everything I had, I pushed Douglas off me and onto the floor. At that moment, I heard this thing that started to emerge. I saw two huge, dark compound eyes look at me before I took the lamp and smashed it. I don't know, maybe a dozen times, until it stopped squealing, and it was nothing more than a bloody pulp on the floor. I was angry now. I wanted payback. Still holding the lamp, I took off into the hallway and crept down the stairs until I reached the bottom. I heard Martha still in the kitchen, fumbling around. I made my way towards her, stopping just before the open doorway. Martha was trying to hum some tune, albeit off-beat, and she had her back to me. I ran in, gripping the lamp in both hands. "Here's your goddamn tea." I smacked her on the head, and she fell down into the cabinets hard. Her whole body started to convulse as I dropped the lamp and ran into the hallway. The one I said I'd never go back down again. I remembered now the bathroom had a window. I opened the bathroom door and saw my chance at escaping this place. And, much to my surprise, there wasn't a bug in sight. I forced the window open and pushed the screen. I climbed out and ran through the tall grass and weeds right to my car. That's when I saw them. People standing in front of their homes. Most of them elderly, some young, but they were all standing looking right at me. Then they all opened their mouths and started emitting a collective hissing noise. It was so loud and awful I had to cover my ears as I got into my car. I floored it in reverse with all these people still standing and now pointing at me. As I drove away, I looked and saw the man I had waved at earlier when I arrived in town. He was waving back this time and had the fakest looking smile I'd ever seen. His waving arm fell off his shoulder as he looked down at it. I turned away in disgust and never looked back. When I was sure I was safe and far enough away, I stopped and called the police from a gas station I found. It was a neighbouring police department and they said they'd go look at it right away. When they questioned me 2 days later back at my apartment, they told me the whole town had been abandoned. There was no trace of anyone. Homes left empty, some still with TVs on. I asked about any people trapped in the house I was at. The officer just shook his head silently. It took a while, but I did find another job at an assisted living facility. This one I applied for in person though, and I'm happy to say it's a great place. A bit of a drive, but it's worth it. No bugs as far as I can tell. I just want to leave you this warning though. Those things, whatever they were, are still out there somewhere. I don't know what they are or where they came from, and I think I made a mistake by killing what was inside of Douglas. At night I can hear the sounds of scratching in my walls. It's my turn for payback. So watch out for news of strange disappearances in your area. And if you ever see a posting like the one I did on Craigslist or anywhere else, take my advice, avoid them at all costs. I have to go now, the scratching's getting louder.